This one? Oh, yeah, that'll do. Sweet. Hello, my name's Jeremy McMullan. I'm an independent contractor to New Zealand government, which could mean almost anything. But I live with the title of security consultant. Doesn't quite describe everything I do, but it's a job I really enjoy, and I'm really proud to come along and give this talk today. Good Dog InfoSec is a little brand I have to be able to give these talks, and I see dogs as a big part of security, and almost everyone I've talked to at the con seems to have a dog. Hands up if you own a dog. There's a few. Hands up if you play video games. Just one or two a year then. I just wanted to make sure I'd pitched this talk correctly. So I was the security lead in the agency. I won't mention agencies because this is a bit of a disclaimer. These are all my anecdotal stories. The agency that rolled out vaccines and took care of COVID response from a health point of view. And my job was to just, turn up. Ooh, that one's on? Oh, I've got two now. Brilliant. My job was to just get in there and do a little bit of C&A for the systems that they were going to roll out across the entire country for 5 million people to get vaccinated or have the COVID response, be delivered. And political stuff aside, that job itself was not put well to me, hence the interview I had. I turned up to the interview after preparing my CV and clearly in jobs that I hadn't challenged myself very much in. And they said, we're going to build a few things on Salesforce. And I said, I know Salesforce. I've done it in my last agency. But really what I knew was a thimbleful of a bucketful's worth of information. S3 buckets. But we'll come back to that. The first few days on the job, I think you've probably figured it out from that video, I felt like a total fraud going in there. Imposter syndrome on steroids. And I think we've all been there, and we know what it feels like. And it's not just that you feel you're underprepared, it's your brain trying to tell you something. You need to think outside of the box if you want to get through this. I essentially went in feeling very level 1. And everyone else was level 50. Some of the smartest people I've ever met, program managers, project managers, BAs, product owners, super, super smart people. And then there were the devs, absolute rocket scientists, architects, security architects. You name it, everyone was absolutely at the top of their game. Naturally, they'd brought in security a bit late. And that's why I felt a bit level 1. They'd already been at it for quite a while. They'd already built COVID Tracer, which I was talking to Simon Howard of ZX earlier today about the rather rigorous assessment they did for that application. They still didn't have a coordinated approach to what they were going to do for immunisations. So yeah, we'll just throw a single person in there and see what happens. The feeling of being a fraud lasted for about 3 weeks until I met a stakeholder, an individual by the name of Caitlin McDonald, privacy guru. And we were fast friends, almost straight away. Absolutely, just totally on the same page about how underprepared we felt for this huge job. So we could at least console each other with that. But in joining forces, we then decided we'd go around all of the stakeholders and not mention things like security frameworks or the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. Policies and standards completely out the window. We needed to adapt, and we needed to do it really fast. They were looking to roll out an immunisation database that would eventually come to hold 4 million New Zealanders' health information, everything about their COVID vaccinations, all those bits and pieces. You will have come across Book My Vaccine. It changes names, and My COVID Record. If these are familiar applications to you, we were doing security for those things at that time. So yes, I'm focusing on the decade between 2021 and 2022. I know that's what it felt like for you, because it's absolutely what it felt like for me and pretty much every New Zealander. This was a crazy stressful time, and taking on that challenge was not an easy ask for anyone involved. And there are people in this room who worked with me and they know exactly what I'm talking about. But it was going to be a fun ride too. Getting around those stakeholders, myself and privacy, learning about what they wanted to achieve, what they wanted to do, it was pretty mammoth. The first thing they wanted to do was collect cohort information. So they had different cohorts for vaccination. As you can imagine, there were priority people to vaccinate. Maybe at the border, be a pretty good place to vaccinate. The customs people, the people managing MIQ, and those sorts of things. And they wanted to be able to collect that data very quickly and do these sorts of things. So when we said, how are you going to do that? Oh, we were just going to email some spreadsheets. Awesome. All that private health information of people working in military organisations, the police, all those things. That sounds really secure. So obviously, at this point, we were dealing with a low rate of maturity as far as security goes, but we couldn't just say no. If we'd said no all of the time, we'd have been sacked and replaced with people who'd say yes. That would have been a terrible outcome for everyone. So we needed to adapt the message we were giving. We gave alternatives for sharing data. We couldn't just tell them to password protect spreadsheets. They get blocked at the firewall, right? Oh, this one's password protected. You need to download it, open it, check it, do all those bits and pieces. And then when it comes into the receiving system, probably at a military organisation, they'll do exactly the same thing. It would slow things down, and they couldn't have that happen. Getting around all these stakeholders, program managers, project managers, was crucial to finding out what are we actually trying to achieve here. And that was delivery, swift delivery. So I'll take it up to level 2, please. At the same time as stakeholders who were actually quite invested in your success and believed in security, there were characters. And I think you've met them. There are people who don't really believe in security, or perhaps they don't want security to hold up their delivery, even though it seems reasonably essential. This was always going to be a difficulty. In this scenario where I came to loggerheads with some characters, because I'm the type of person who likes to reflect people back at them. Funnily enough, some people don't like that, and it tells you a lot about them. What I did, of course, was take someone in my team and use them as a proxy, someone much more charming than me, to actually manage those types of people, and in particular, work on programs that were going to be quite difficult. Someone who knew security and could manage those sorts of things. We have to realise when our skills are short and use other people to help us out. And that's a big thing, especially when dealing with characters. It's not just, designing your character in a video game, but I thought that one worked well. Level 3, please. Winning over the exec. So lots of senior managers. The most amazing thing for me about working inside that agency at that time, they stood up a separate business unit, 450 contractors at peak DAT. That's a lot of contractors. But of course, everything was evergreen or new. The only use of legacy systems was integrating to pull data from those legacy systems into the new systems. Winning over the exec and getting their support was crucial. If we did not have that senior management buy-in for security, we would not have been able to apply ourselves to what we needed to do, which in theory was meant to be certification and accreditation. We actually did more advisory than certification and accreditation, so that by the time we got to doing certification and accreditation. Things weren't too bad. But if we needed to stop a project from going live, which, as you can imagine, when that could be the choice to save lives or have good security, that was tricky and it needed to be negotiated. And you need to have had the conversations with all the senior managers and the project manager and the devs and get their buy-in to hold up a project before you actually came out and officially said, oh yes, security says you can't go ahead. If I just said, security says no, I would have been laughed out of the room and they would have gone live. There were always good reasons for holding up a project and generally the results of a penetration test or something like that. So having that exec support was critical, and I did. The executives put their egos aside during this time, and they all worked together and they got involved and showed what I would call ideal behaviours for the scenario. Level 4, please. In this particular instance, I was still feeling very underprepared for what I needed to do, and this meant recalling previous mentors. I'm talking particularly the CISO of ACC, Matt Roundthwaite. Applying a lot of his thinking was really important, but I also had good team members beside me in the wider ministry/agency. Tom Britton being one of them, and I think a lot of people in here know Tom. Clever dude, and without him I would have been in a bit of trouble, much cleverer than me. It was pretty much time to be thinking about what would my mentors have done, and they probably would have grown the team. Level 5, please. Acknowledging that you've grown in a very short space of time, so we'll call it 3 months, it has to be done. You've got to recognise that even though you did feel completely underprepared to begin with, you've come quite far. And again, because it was a decade inside 2 years, at the speed things were happening, you really were getting smarter and better at negotiating your way around things. Occasionally, you might have actually set pen to paper and done a CNA when you had the time. Level 6, please. This is my favourite bit. We would have gotten nowhere if we hadn't gone to third-party companies to engage penetration testers, configuration reviewers, and CNA wizards. We simply could not scale quick enough. By this time, there were 3 of us in the team, a fellow called Michael and someone else called Taylor, but we had to scale up, and that meant getting a third-party company in to come in and actually start testing these systems. Still not at the point of doing CNA. We're still building the plane and flying it at the same time. So they could be ready to go to production without pen testing, which meant we had a very short space of time to do it. And I think this is normal, right? Except we actually did have to do the pen testing and it needed to be done fast. So we had to negotiate with our third-party companies. Do you think you could shorten your lead times? Do you think you could be a bit quicker? And you know those lovely reports you do for pen tests? Don't worry about those. Just email us, you know, the showstoppers from the pen test. Less than ideal things, and there was reluctance, but it was necessary. And being able to work with the account managers to get those outcomes and have the people doing the work make a little bit of allowance to do this was very good. We're also lucky enough to have pen testers and config reviewers sit on site with us in the team. As they were finding things, they'd raise them to us, then we'd go to the product teams and say, we've found some stuff. Do you think you could fix it before you go live? I know you've only got 2 days, but they did. They fixed it. And then we retested straight away. So that pen test rhythm got settled in. I should mention this was hellishly expensive. But it was fantastic, and we started learning so much more about things, and we were able to mature things as well. To be able to throw up a website, critical vulnerability, highs, a couple of mediums, and oh, look, you've got an informational. That's nice. To be able to give the product teams that information and say, here's the ones you've got to fix right now, but we're going to give you some runway for these orangey ones, and the informational will come back to that further. This was a lot, right? I mean, Jono, cross-site scripting. Cross-site scripting. I don't get it. Why? But yes, it just feels like a 101. So we're building websites with cross-site scripting vulnerabilities in there, right? 12 months later, we're not. And so I can say to the teams, oh, that's nice. You built a website without some vulnerabilities like cross-site scripting. That's awesome. Go you. I never framed it like that. I did give them the pat on the back. We got to a point further down the track where pen testing, the result was we matured development so much that we were starting to bore the pen testers with blank reports. Ah, you didn't find anything. This was remarkable, and it did happen over time. This wasn't just something that happened very quickly. We were always finding vulnerabilities here and vulnerabilities there. But websites were the least of our issues. We had the vaccination certificate system, which was another very rigorous assessment, much like the COVID tracer one, where we went up the whole wazoo to test that cryptography. And they weren't quite rolling their own crypto, but they certainly were doing some magic under the hood and putting our pen testers against it to smash it in real time as they were, again, flying the plane, building the plane, all of the things, was the only thing that made sure we knew we had a good product on our hands. They were also a very good vendor, which helped in that sense. So that level of maturity, which is nearly impossible to get under normal circumstances, was something we were able to apply across the entire program. 7 programs. 7 programs of work, each with as many projects. And that was just day 1, right? Or day 3, I should say, that agile planning meeting. I always called it the 7 times 7 because it told us how much work there was going to be. And as time went on, we got more budget, we grew the team, and got more really good people. Level 7, please. Coming to the rescue, there's 2 parts to this. After a while, because we'd built such a good rep inside the programs and had good people within our own team and good people coming from vendors, occasionally when things weren't going wrong, I'd get asked to dial into a meeting. Eventually, my job just became to smooth things over, to still get a good security outcome, not to demean in any way the intention of our vendors and their way of doing security, but also to get the right business outcome for the product teams who were wanting to deliver those services. There's another bit to this come to the rescue, and it's important to me. At some point, I don't remember chronologically much about 2021, 2022, if I'm to be honest. At some point around there was a radio interview about one of our products that we'd put out there for New Zealanders to use, and some possibly not entirely well contextualised information discussed about the product, and it didn't sound good. And at this point, we were far too distracted and busy with what we were doing to really think about it. But the community, the security community, the people in this room, came to our rescue, posting on social media, hey, this is out of context, or this isn't quite right. We might not have said it before, but it really mattered. And I am forever grateful. Thank you. Level 8, please. Just offering help. Sometimes I think it wasn't about doing anything particularly special. It was sitting down, having a conversation to try and move these products out, to have security conversations at the level the business people needed to have it back, then translate it back to our vendors and vice versa. And this was critical. It meant we were presenting a safe space for projects to talk about things. And I think back to Sarah's talk about creating those safe spaces. Absolutely critical. If they couldn't be honest with us about what they were doing, and sometimes they were doing some crazy shit, if we punished them every time they told us something bad, they'd never talk to us. So sometimes we just had to accept it and help them do something better. And that was our jobs a lot of the time. Level 9. Prepare for the tough jobs. I think back to the early days, right, and how little I knew about anything, to be honest. And having the third-party CNA wizard and the battle-hardened pen tester, we'd spend a couple hours going through everything we were going to do, and then we'd go and talk to the product team about what was really going on. Things were slightly less ideal, and we needed to help them move forward, even though they had to deliver in just the next few days. It was important that I knew what I needed to say, and not being super technical, even though my background is infrastructure and all those sorts of things. My background's also hospitality. But for me to know those things was crucially important to be able to have the right outcomes. And if I hadn't had the pen tester and the CNA person spend that time with me to actually discuss those things, it would have been a problem. Level 10. Celebrate success. This was so important. You'd finally get through a certification and accreditation. It will have been 3 months in the workings, but in the real world, more like a system that takes 18 months to build. Those sorts of things. So huge amounts of documentation. You've coached it through the CISO, you've coached it through the CTO, you've got it all the way up to the Deputy Director General who puts their signature on high-risk systems. And it's 3 days until they actually turn the product down and it goes live, and Jacinda gets up to the lectern and says, go to this website. Celebrating that success happened when we'd got the documents signed off, not when we waited for the website to go live. It was important because we had it's massively anticlimactic. We've done all this work and then nothing for 3 days on the system. So celebrating that success with the team, take them out to lunch, might have had a beer, and just actually acknowledge the work that had been done was critical within the team itself, not just waiting for the product teams to celebrate. And I'll be honest with you, there was not a lot of opportunity to do celebration for those product teams. They took it when they could get it. But in security, we had to do it. We had to acknowledge that we'd worked very hard. That included the vendors, right? Come have lunch with us. Really important. I'll never forget when the Prime Minister got up and announced, book my vaccine in bits and pieces, and we could see it on the dashboards, AWS chugging before it scaled. Just about everyone in New Zealand hit that website at the same time. It's quite amazing. The next one, last slide. I think I've gone over a bit. I'll wrap it up. Level 50, you've got this. This is not my level 50. This is my team, but in particular, one person. Her name is Taylor Layton. I hired Taylor, 23 years of age, no security experience, none. Attitude, aptitude. She is now a security consultant with CyberCX, one of their most successful. The effort that went in to training her up was worth it because she was invested in her own success. And this is critical. To find these people and train them up into security is a duty we all have. We must develop more security professionals. And if we can engage in a little bit more diversity, that's good too. We should absolutely do that. I meet with Taylor weekly. We have coffees, talk about things and bits and pieces like that. It's a commitment. When you train someone up and you've worked with them so hard, for what felt like 10 years, but 18 months effectively, you've got to continue to give advice and you've also got to continue to listen. I'll never forget being in a meeting room with Taylor and a vendor and me, doing I think we should do this. And Taylor turns around and says, no, we should do this. And the vendor looks horrified. Like, she's contradicted you, man. And I just turned to her and said, I trust you, right? We'll do what you want to do. Trust is key with your people. We would never have done any of this COVID delivery if I couldn't have trusted my team, myself, and my vendors, who I can see their faces in the audience here. It was critical. And when you're delivering in such high pressure times, that trust and that faith, not just in yourself, your team, and the vendors, also extends out to the product teams, the senior executives, all the way up to, effectively, Ashley Bloomfield at the time. That really mattered, and that is what is important when you're delivering in a crisis. Build a team you can trust and show them that you trust them. I could have probably waxed on for another 5 hours on this topic. I have a zillion stories. I will be out in the foyer later on. By all means, ask me some questions. Absolutely happy to talk about it. And gaming too, if you like. That's what I did when I wasn't at work. Video gaming the whole time. My 2 full-time jobs. Yeah, COVID, video games. Yeah. I owe my wife a lot. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Busted.